Abraham, you're the God of covenants and faithful promises. And time again, you have proven you do just what you say. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness to me. From the rising sun to the setting same, I will praise your name. Great is your faithfulness to me. God, from age to age, though the earth may pass away, your word remains the same. Yeah, your history can prove there's nothing you can't do. You're faithful and true. Though the storms may come and the winds may blow, I'll remain steadfast and let my heart learn when you speak a word, it will come to pass. Great is your faithfulness to me. Great is your faithfulness. From the rising sun
Well, hey everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us today. If you are a little bit newer to Ethos, my name is Jordan, and my wife Courtney and I have the amazing privilege of being the lead pastors here. We just want to say welcome and thanks for taking some time out of your schedule to be with us. In fact, if you are newer to Ethos, we would love it if you'd let us know. We would love to donate $5 on your behalf to a local organization that we partner with called She Has a Name, who's fighting human trafficking all across Central Ohio. You can actually go right now to our website, ethosoh.com, and fill out the connection card, search for the tab that says connection card, or just simply text Ethos New to the number 94000. We're not gonna hound you or randomly show up at your house, but we would love just to simply know that you're with us today. And again, we're gonna donate $5 on your behalf. And that's just one of the ways that you can actually make a difference, just by simply showing up and filling out that connection card. Also, next Sunday, come on church, it is Comeback Sunday. It is our first time that we're gonna be gathering in person in a year. Never would I have thought that we would not be gathering, at least indoors, for an entire year. But I also never would have thought that we would have seen God's faithfulness to the degree that we had over the past year. I'm so grateful, and I cannot wait to see so many of you in person. But here's the deal too, if you're not comfortable showing up in person yet, that is okay. Do not feel or allow anybody to make you feel less than. We want you to know that you are seen and valued, and we're going to continue to stream our services online, also putting all of our kids' content online as well. So parents, make sure that you continue to take advantage of that. But speaking of kids, if you are going to be in person next weekend, we do have limited capacity in our kids' classrooms. Due to the CDC guidelines, nationwide guidelines, and just all that we're putting in place to ensure that we come back safely and just healthily, we have limited capacity in our kids' classrooms, so you need to register your kids. Now adults, you do not need to register. We believe that we have plenty of space for our adults in our new home of Nationwide Conference Center. But for kids, we've only got 3 classrooms open at the time. And again, you can go online and go to ethosoh.com/regather, or just click the regather button on our homepage and you get all the information there. It's also the link where you can go ahead and register for your kids too. Again, cannot wait to see you all face to face. I'm just telling you right now, I am one excited preacher to actually get to preach to people in the room, so I can't wait. Hey, it's one of the greatest privileges that we have as a community here at Ethos to practice generosity. And if you're newer to Ethos, don't feel obligated to do anything I'm about to share with us. But if you consider Ethos to be your home church, we get excited, we really do. We want to give joyfully, live open-handedly. It's why one of our values is that generosity is our privilege. And we'd like to practice generosity every time that we gather together, whether in person or virtually, so that we can continue to make a difference. You know, your generosity really determines the speed of the vision. And I'm just so grateful that we've continued to lean into generosity. Now again, there's 3 ways that you can give, and you're probably familiar with these 3, but if you're a little bit newer, you can go online, ethosoh.com. You can give by cash or check, just kind of send that to the information there on the screen, or you can text to give. Just text the amount you want to give to the number 84321. Okay, so we've got a special guest, and he's really not even a guest. He's a friend, he's a family member here at Ethos. He's going to share with us this weekend. His name's Grady Dalzell. So many of you know him already. To know him is to love he and his wife Taylor. They're amazing. I love these guys. They've become dear friends of mine. I just love hanging out with Grady. His heart to encourage people, his heart to reach people. It really is second to none. And so I've asked him to share with us this weekend. Again, he's not a guest. He's family here at Ethos. And so I've already heard his message. That's the cool thing about these recordings. So I know that it's going to encourage you. I know that it's going to challenge you. I know it's going to stretch you. And so I've been praying that your heart would be opened and allow the voice of God's Spirit to speak directly to you concerning the words that, and just using the words that Grady's about to speak. So let's lean in and listen to Grady today.
Hey Ethos, Grady Dalzell here. Excited to be with you. Thanks for letting me be a part of what's going on here. I've been going to Ethos Church for a year and a half since North Church merged. But before that, I've been running around in Delaware County for about 10 years. When I became a volunteer Young Life leader at Olentangy, and I've been on full-time Young Life staff the last 10 years. 7 years ago, I got married to a woman named Taylor. She's phenomenal. Anyone that's met her, you know this. If you've not met her, you should. But she's amazing. She is really, really amazing. And she taught high school English for 3 years, but actually a couple of years ago, she came on full-time Young Life staff with me, and it's been a blast, and she's phenomenal. And I I love getting to work with her. Our relationship, though, wasn't always so spectacular. In fact, kind of my history with ladies in general is often mostly not smooth. In particular with Taylor, there's lots of bumbles and fumbles, and it is by the grace of God that we managed to stay together. This is, when we met, and the first time I tried to make a move, when I asked for her father's blessing for her hand in marriage, kind of across the board, lots of bumbles, but maybe most poignantly pictured actually when we got engaged. We'd been dating for 2.5 years, long distance. She went to Cal Berkeley, I went to Ohio State, and then went on staff with Young Life in Delaware, Ohio. And so we're dating long distance, lots of Skype, our relationship primarily over the phone. But then it came to the point where it was like, no, I'm sure I want to do this. And so she becomes aware that I've talked to her father, and so she knows that at some point engagement is probably going to happen. So she comes on vacation with my family and I. We go to Topsail Island, North Carolina every summer. And she's kind of suspecting the whole time, okay, this is it. This is the week that it happens. As the vacation goes on, there's several times where we're kind of alone. There's sunsets. We go out to dinner. And I can tell she's like, oh, this might be the time. It might be happening. And then each time, oh, no, it does not happen. And she's wondering, like, kind of what's happening. So we leave the vacation. I go to drop her off at the airport with my buddy, Matt Pennington, who lived with me at the time. And she gets ready to fly back to San Diego, California, which is actually where she's from. And she's pretty sad. She's calling her sister at the airport, being like, I'm trying not to be bummed, but I thought I was getting engaged, and it hasn't happened. Little does she know, after we dropped her off at the airport, I am with Matt at McDonald's, where all good engagement stories should start. We're at McDonald's and I'm changing into a shirt and tie. And here's the plan. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to go back to the airport, is the hope. I'm going to get onto a different plane, beat her back to San Diego, California, so that when she shows up at the airport and comes down the escalator, there I'll be doing this grandiose gesture for her and ask her to marry me. That's the hope. That's the plan. That's the dream. So me and my buddy Matt, we're at the airport. I've put on my shirt and tie, and we're talking through the scenario, and he's like, what if you get busted at the airport? What if she sees you when you're in there? And I'm like, oh man, I didn't even think about that. And we're like, we got to come up with, what are you going to do? What are you going to say when she sees you? We're like, well, maybe I'll just, kind of just be really cheesy. Be like, I had to tell you I love you one last time, and then still sneak onto my plane. Or he's like, no, I got it. What you need to do, if she says, hey, Grady, what are you doing? Just act like she's got the wrong person and just keep going. Like, yeah, that's not a good idea at all. So anyway, I go in, I go in through ticketing, I get in through security, and I immediately make a beeline to the men's room to hide for an hour because I'm not trying to get busted before my plane's boarding. I'm sitting in there texting my buddies. You're not going to believe where I'm at right now. Boom, I come out. She's sitting at the terminal. If you've been at the Columbus airport, you know what I'm talking about, where almost everybody goes down this one straightaway long drag. And when I look out the bathroom, she is about 80 yards down looking directly the direction I'm going to have to walk by. And so I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? So I grab a magazine, grab a hat, find a couple people, and I just start to draft them. I'm like, gotta go. Boom. I make it through. I get on my plane, hop the plane, head over to San Diego. Seemingly the hard part is done. We get to San Diego. I beat her there. I find her dad and her mom are there waiting for me and her brother, and they're all really excited, and we start going through the plan. If you've ever been in the San Diego airport, pretty much 90% of all passengers come down this one escalator that's in this huge marble ballroom looking place, which is pretty perfect for what I have planned. So here's what I'm thinking. She's going to come down this escalator in this huge, beautiful marble ballroom, and I'm going to get her attention while she is on the escalator so that she doesn't have to think. She can just see me there, and I'm going to get down on one knee so that she has time to process what's going on. She doesn't have to. She can literally just be delivered to me, and I'm going to be on one knee, and she's going to figure it out. Everyone will be watching. People will applaud, clap. Maybe Goo Goo Dolls in the background will be playing, I want to wake up where you are. It's going to be perfect. This does not happen. I get there. Her dad reveals to me, hey, she's one of the few people that her plane's not coming out of this terminal. We got to go to this other one. So we go to the other terminal. It's not as pretty, not as cool, but we're like, whatever. It's about the gesture. So we're over there waiting. We don't see Taylor. And then Taylor's dad gets a call, and it's Taylor. And it actually turns out, no, she did come out in the marble ballroom. Would have worked, didn't happen. So instead of in this amazing, beautiful room where she doesn't have to think and she gets delivered to me. Instead of that being how she sees me first to ask for her hand in marriage, instead we're in this like feebly lit cement corridor, and instead of like from about 20 yards away getting delivered right to my footstep, instead we see each other from about 120 yards away in the halfway dark, kind of limping through the dark. It feels like 3 a.m., so she's drunken with tiredness, and it's this awkward, long, slow march toward each other. And like her parents are like right here on either side of me. Her sister's getting Skyped in, and we're walking. I'm like, this is so awkward. It's just silent. And she's like, what's happening? Holding her pillow. She's waddling down, and beautifully and cute like she does. And so we finally walk up, and I'm like, okay, I just got to do this thing. I know this feels awkward and weird, but I just got to do it. So I get down on one knee, expecting like her family to give a little space. No space. Zero space, sir. Like they are all up in my grill. Like her sister's getting Skyped in, no joke, like right here, no joke. And then her dad, Dewey, is like right here. Part of me wants to be like, do you want to do this, Dewey? Like, so I get down on one knee, I say my spiel, I ask her to marry me, and it happens. She says yes. We got engaged, and her friends were at a party a little bit afterward, but it was awkward. It was weird. In fact, so much so, about a year later, we were walking past the spot at one point when we flew out there, and she's like, remember we got engaged there? And I got this pit in my stomach where I was like, oh, that was so awkward. And here's the deal. I tell that story like it was a blast. It was hilarious. I'm glad it worked out that way, but it could have been really easy, and still can be really easy to kind of get caught up in this huge thing that we want to write to make our life look a certain way, seem a certain way, to be enjoyed a certain way, but way bigger than this perfect plan that would have communicated this thing, way bigger than these things that I was trying to plan and line up, was the weightier, more significant, lifelong stuff that was happening. Taylor agreed to marry me. We were engaged to get married, and we're going to spend the rest of our lives together. These other things that it could have been easy for me to get really caught up in and bent out of shape about probably really had more to do with a story that I was trying to write, I was trying to white knuckle, I was trying to hold on to. Really, I thought might make me look like a certain light, but way bigger, better, amazing things were happening in getting engaged to Taylor. And why I bring that up is because I believe that often, myself, and I would say all of us, we can tend to get caught up in these stories or narratives, these things that we think that we need to have. If only we had this, our life looked like this, if we got to this place, when God is really trying to do way bigger, more beautiful, significant things. And that's what I'm going to invite us to consider together. And so if you have a Bible, wherever you are right now, I'd invite you to open up to Acts 17. We're going to pick up in verse 22 together. And so let me set the scene for us before we jump in. So we're about to encounter a guy named the Apostle Paul. This guy, for a long time, wasn't a Christian. In fact, he persecuted Christians, was trying to demolish Christianity in a way he can. And then he actually had a significant encounter with Christ. And so he's actually going city to city. There's not a city in the world that wants him to come and share Christ, but he's going. He's showing up, and he's watching tons and tons of people have their lives transformed as they hear about the reality of Jesus and what he's done for them. So Paul is in Athens, Greece here. And here's kind of the deal with Athens as he's kind of interacting with these guys. Here's kind of what's going on in Athens. The people he's interacting with, the Areopagus and these philosophers, they're well educated. This city's really diverse, wealthy. They take the arts seriously. There's a religious diversity. And there's like a plethora of different morality, and it's just a very diverse sort of thing going on. It's not unlike what we encounter in America or even Columbus today. This is what's kind of happening. In fact, in the verse right before where we're going to pick up, in verse 21, this is what it says about these people. It says, "Now the Athenians and the foreigners who lived there would spend their time in nothing except telling or hearing something new." That literally they were just so caught up in sharing what's the newest, latest thought, story, how do we improve, what's the next best thing. It's eerily similar to what we find ourselves in. Podcasts are taking off. We're obsessed with stories. Netflix. I recently read that over 6 billion hours of Netflix is streamed every single month. 6 billion hours every month. And I think it's probably just the people that go to Ethos. Just kidding, I jest. But that's so much time. But I'm not saying that to be critical of how much we do that, but what does that say about us? That we spend so much time listening to podcasts, considering ideas, trying to get lost in stories. What does that say about us? What does that say about us? That there's something there that's calling to us. And that's kind of what these guys are caught up in. So that's the scene that kind of Paul is going to jump into. So look with me now at we're going to start in verse 22 through 23. And so he comes before them and he starts to share with them what he sees. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you're very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship as unknown, this I proclaim to you." So he starts off by affirming them, by saying, hey, I've been watching you guys, and man, you are dedicated. You are very religious. You are serious about your craft. You are seeking improvement. He affirms them. He starts off by doing that. But while affirming, he also then points out where they are already acknowledged that they don't know everything. There's a statue that says, "To the unknown God," and he uses this as a door to begin to challenge them. There's a guy named Tim Keller who was a pastor for a long time in the heart of New York City, and he talks about this reality that if it's true that all of humanity was made in the image of God, that literally in every culture on any part of the earth, any single culture, you would be able to find something that you'd be able to affirm. Simply because we were all made in the image of God. That there's going to be something there that you can affirm. But also he's saying if it's true that God is big enough that he created everything, including us, if he's really that big, that huge, that not only is there something to affirm, but also if he's that big or that huge, that God, if he's that massive, he will also, no matter who he's talking to, he will also always challenge us in some place in our lives. We can't get around it. He's that big and that huge. And so he takes this opportunity to affirm them, and I hope that we all feel affirmed by a lot of what we're going to talk about here, but he sees this door of them acknowledging, actually, I don't know everything, to begin to challenge them. And I believe that he wants to challenge us too. I hope that you feel super affirmed in what we're about to jump into, but I also think that God wants to keep pulling the curtain back on the reality of who he is and what he's inviting us into. And this is what he begins to do when he says, "To the unknown God, this is what I want to talk to you about." And he goes on, check this out. Verse 24, "The God who made the world and everything in it, being the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything." So he starts to point out this picture. He's like, hey, that unknown God, what you don't know about him, he starts to paint this huge, massive, unbelievable picture about the reality of who God is. That he's massive. That God doesn't live in these boxes, these temples that they create for him, no matter how much they want to say, yeah, this is what he's like. No, he's bigger than that. He doesn't stay in these boxes that we try to create for him, no matter how strongly you hold on to that. He also points out that he doesn't need us. He's not served by human hands as though he needs anything. He's not sitting around today watching this recording of this sermon thinking, oh man, if Grady doesn't deliver on this, what am I going to do? Like, no, he's got this. He's huge. He is massive. You know, like he was pointing out literally at the time that these offerings, the literal sacrifices that they would bring to their temples to try to appease the gods they believed in, that he doesn't need those as though he's served by your hands in anything. But we do similar things all the time today. If I'm honest, I think often the things that I do for God, whether it be my time, money, the acts of service, that sometimes, if I'm honest with myself, I can tend to think that I'm almost like doing God a favor. Almost like God's lucky that I'm on his team. Like, you're welcome, God. But what Paul's pointing out here is like, no, like, he's so big, he made everything. He gave life. He made it all. He's not sitting like, what am I going to do if they don't figure it out? What am I going to do if Ethos doesn't really? He's God. He has got this thing. He is so big. He shows them this picture that God is way bigger and way better than you thought. And the same is true for me and true for us. God is massive. This is the picture that he paints. It's bigger and better than they see right now. It's true for us. But then he goes on to explain how this bigger and better reality of God, then how does that intersect with their lives? How does that intersect with our lives? Here we go. Verse 26. And he made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined the allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. So he paints this huge picture of who God is, but then he goes on to say, he is way more in control and active in everything going on than you thought. It says that actually he made from one man all mankind, and then even he allotted the periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place. What he is pointing out to them is he's asserting that even his standing before them as he's sharing this with them was actually a sovereign act of God. He's even proposing that my being in your living room right now or wherever you're listening to me is also no accident. That God has aligned the times and places we are, the relationships that we're in to end up in this moment, in this time, wherever you're listening or checking this out. That he is way more active, way more in control, alive and close than we ever dreamed. But why? Why? If he doesn't need us, if he's not like, oh man, please come play with me, what am I going to do? If he doesn't need us, why? Why has he set up the times and places that we are? What is he doing with this? Paul goes on. He's allotted the periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, verse 27, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. Yet he is actually not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as even some of your own poets have said, for we are indeed his offspring. So we are actually when and where we are. Why has he set these times and places? That we would feel our way toward God and find him. That we would feel our way toward God and find him. That literally you are in the time and place that you are, that you would know him. That you would know him. And he points out, as even their own poets are saying, like, we're actually in him, we live and move and have our being. I talked a little bit about Netflix earlier, unashamedly most of the times, but then sometimes with some shame. I do love Netflix, many a series, many a movie. I've spent late night watching, and I just love it. I love stories. I love getting caught up in them. They're amazing. I don't know if any of you are Chronicles of Narnia or Lord of the Rings fans. I love them. These big, epic, huge stories. They're amazing. But what's really cool to me is the authors of those. So for Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis. But then for Lord of the Rings, J.R. Tolkien, they were actually friends. They were buddies. They actually hung out at the bar and would talk about stories, would talk about life together all the time. For a long time, C.S. Lewis was not a Christian. He was far too aware of his own hurt, sadness, loneliness, and as well as just the hurt and brokenness of the world. Because of what he saw in the world, he's like, there's no way there can be a God. And if there is a God, there's no way he can be good, as he just looked at everything around him. J.R. Tolkien, on the other hand, though, he was a Christian. And so they'd sit at the pub drinking a Guinness, and he'd be talking to him about life and sharing Jesus with him. And part of how he would do this would talk about the reality of what they loved so much, stories. How they spent their lives writing these tales of love, adventure, redemption. And part of Tolkien's argument for him was why we love these stories so much, these huge, epic, romantic, adventure, redemption stories so much. Why we love them is they are shadows of the real thing. That they're all just shadows, echoes of the real deal that is happening in God, and in particular, the story of Jesus. And so what Paul is pointing out here as he walks through this is that he uses this language. Look back at it with me in verse 27. It says that we've been put in the time and places we are that we might feel their way toward him and find him. This language of feeling their way toward him and find him is almost like this image of like we're in a room and the light's been turned out. And so we're just kind of like groping around trying to find our way through. And sometimes life feels more obvious like that. But what he's asserting here is literally all the things that we find ourselves longing for, running really, really hard for. Paul's asserting is we're actually looking for God. We're trying to fill this void that God was meant to fill. So whether it be you find yourself ultimately running, if you find yourself thinking, man, if once I get to this point in my career, my 401k, once my kids get set up here in terms of grades and they get to this college so they can get to this point, if only that woman or that man looked at me that way, would say these things to me. All these things that we long for, and ultimately we make the center of these stories, these narratives. We say that if I just had this, they're actually all attempts to reach the real thing. They're all echoes, they're all shadows of the real deal that we were meant for. We're all actually looking for God, is what he's asserting. Here's how C.S. Lewis. So C.S. Lewis actually ends up meeting Jesus, becoming a Christian, and became one of the most important Christian writers of the 20th century. And so he says this as he reflects back on our hopes and dreams of what we're longing for, running after. Check this out. Check this out, this quote from C.S. Lewis. "The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located," so he's talking about his stories, but this could be for us. When we think like, once I get to this place, once I have this vacation spot, once my house looks or feels like this, once I have this standing in the neighborhood, and maybe we don't ever say it that explicitly, but we're thinking it and working toward it. But for him, it's the stories. He says, "The books or the music in which we thought the beauty was located will betray us if we trust to them. It was not in them, these things that we try to build our life on. It only came through them, and what came through them was longing. These things, the beauty, the memory of our own past, are good images of what we really desire. But if they are mistaken for the thing itself, they turn into dumb idols, breaking the hearts of their worshipers. For they are not the thing itself. They are only the scent of a flower we have not found, the echo of a tune we have not yet heard, news from a country that we have never visited." What he's saying is, these things we're grasping on, they are shadows, they're echoes of the real deal. If we're searching for something to give us security, whether it be standing or financially, the ultimate security is standing with and in the love of the Almighty God. What can compare to that? If it's the love of someone else, we're like, once I can get someone to think this, feel this way for me. No, it's a shadow of the reality of God knows you way better than anybody ever could, but he's still all in with you. He's in for good. Purpose. We want our lives to matter. We drive our lives around this. God is inviting us to partner with him to see the world redeemed to himself, to be made back, to put back the way it was created to be, where we're living full life. But we put in these cheap substitutes for these other stories. And Paul is saying, no, he set the time and places that we would know him. As we're groping around for these other things, we really are meant to know him. So what do I grasp it at? What is it for you? When I was in high school, it was whatever I could do to get other people to think, there's the man, there he is. I work for a nonprofit ministry, so some might not say I make a ton of money, but I totally find myself at times being like, well, as long as we have this kind of cushion, then I can not worry and I'll be all right. I often, still in rooms, I'll be like, okay, what do I need to do to be seen as a central part, a central cog of this? Because if they don't see me, if I don't feel useful to them, it can feel crippling. What is it for you? What's the story that you're writing that you think this is, if I only had this, if only I was looked at like this, if only I could be a part of this, that you think would really do it for you? What is it for you? What is it for you? Here's Paul. I mentioned he wasn't a Christian for a long time. Then he has an encounter with Jesus himself. And this is how he reflects back on his life previous to following Christ. And the things he was chasing, the story he was trying to write for himself, he was good at it. He was conquering the game. And maybe you feel like that. Maybe you're like, man, no, I'm pretty good. I'm climbing a ladder. Things are looking and feeling good. But after he has this encounter with the reality of Jesus, this is what Paul, when he looks back on his life of power, of wealth, of standing, when he sees the real Jesus, this is what he says. This is what he encounters. This is in Philippians 3, verses 7 and 8. This is Paul. He says, "But whatever gain I had," that lists, that story that he was achieving, "whatever gain I had, I counted as loss for the sake of Christ." Why? "Indeed, I count everything as loss because of the surpassing worth of knowing Christ Jesus, my Lord. For his sake I have suffered the loss of all things and count them as rubbish, in order that I may gain Christ. What he's saying is what I have tasted in the reality of God, not the substitute, not the shadow or the echo, but the real thing itself that I was made for, that I've realized now, it has made everything else look dim, and it's lost in comparison. It's so much better. It's so much greater. In fact, he says he counts them as rubbish. The Greek word in here is actually a slang term for like animal feces. So he's literally, it's animal turds. That's what he's saying. It's animal dung. You should edit out animal turds and just say it's animal dung in comparison. He's like, it's all rubbish compared to knowing Jesus. It's so much better. It's the real deal. And he has set the time and places that you are, that you would know this Jesus, that you would know this God. You're watching today. You're being a part of the community that you're in. It's not about getting standing even within that Christian pocket, or about, oh, look at the good things I'm doing so I can feel good about myself. All those things even exist for us to know him better, join him in what he's doing. But he has not only set the time and place where I am and where you are, but also those around you. What does that mean? I mean, not that he needs me, but he has put you specifically where you are in the time and place for a reason, that others would know God too. What are the practical implications of this? Like, they're huge, they're massive. That literally in the neighborhood that I live now, like, it's no accident that I have the neighbors around me, and he has positioned us so that they may know God too. Not just me, but them as well. The part of how God is going to reveal himself to other people is going to be through me, through the time and place that he sat me. That literally the shoulders that you're going to be bumping once COVID begins to not be a thing, that when you're at your kids' soccer games, the Zoom meetings that you're in, who you're bumping into on your way to the restroom at work, it's no accident that you're bumping into them. That God has actually aligned those things that, one, so you would know God, the reality who he is, but then also that they would too. And these things actually work in conjunction. It's not just like, okay, I met Christ and so now I need other people to know him too, but these work in conjunction. Check this out. This comes in Philemon verse 6. That when we serve, when we start looking around in this way, when we serve, when we give, when we love, when we sacrifice for Jesus, look at what's going on. Check out Philemon verse 6. And I pray, this is Paul again, that the sharing of your faith may become effective for the full knowledge of every good thing that is in us for the sake of Christ. So he says that as we are sharing Christ with other people, and whether that be starting by just loving them, learning their names, reflecting God's interest in them by being interested in their stories, having them over, showing, and so we show them the love of God by giving good hospitality, serving, giving away. That as we are doing that, that actually becomes effective for our growing and our own understanding of our faith. This isn't like, okay, let me learn everything and then I go and jump in. But literally, as we are serving and joining God in what he's doing, revealing himself to people, that we will grow in our knowledge of God and in what we have in Christ. But so will they. So will they. There are people in your life that as you pursue Jesus and you start to look around your rooms and your spheres of influence that you're in, that as you start to look at them and consider how God feels about them, God is going to use you to change their life. The love that Jesus has for them will become real to them, in large part because he uses you to learn their name, their story, to invite them in, to help them feel not alone, and then to introduce them to the reality of Jesus. And their life will be changed forever, and your view of God and who he is will become even bigger and better, and you'll see even more that, oh, this is the real thing I was made for, not this tiny story, these other fake substitutes. Paul wraps up his address to these guys in Athens like this. Verse 29. Being then God's offspring, we ought not to think that the divine being, so God, because we're his offspring, he made us, we ought not to think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone or an image formed by the art and imagination of man. The times of ignorance God overlooked, but now, he's saying The reality of who God is, the reality, which does not change no matter what I think of him. He is who he is, and it's wonderful and better than we know are the strokes that he just painted. It's not formed by the imagination of man. This ignorance where we try to no, this is the ultimate story, whether it be our pursuits of these smaller, lesser, temporary things that are going to fail us. He's like the ignorance he's overlooked. And in Jesus, he's forgiven us for these pursuits of things that don't really matter, that will fail, that we aren't really made for, that won't ultimately be able to hold us. He's overlooked them. In Jesus, we are forgiven totally, completely. But now, Paul invites the Athenians and us to link arms with him and to know him and join him and other people knowing him. He's amazing. God doesn't want it to be any secret to you, your loved ones, the people you work with, how huge he is, how powerful he is, how sufficient himself, but how interested in you, how much he loves you, how much he wants for you. He doesn't want it to be any secret. He wants it to be alive and vivid, and he is doing a thing. He's changing the world, and he wants to use us to do it. Again, I love movies, and it can be easy. Sometimes it can be really exciting at the beginning of a movie. When you find out later, you're like, oh, that was based off a true story. You're like, oh, that's amazing. That's so fun. But the story that we actually are in, the real, authentic, genuine article that God is writing, it's way bigger, way better than any movie we've seen, any story we're trying to write for ourselves. And it is real. It's happening. You're in it. God loves you and is inviting you deeper into it. So here's just a few questions I want us to consider as we wrap up here. What is the story that you are telling yourself will ultimately fulfill you, deliver you, satisfy you? What is it? 2, how is the story that God is writing bigger and better than that story? How is the reality that God has actually orchestrated things, put us where we are so that we can know him and other people know him and his reality and his love? How's it actually better? And then 3, what specific areas of your life do you need to let God begin to write into this bigger, better thing? Are there places where you're like, yeah, God, I'm in on Sundays, I'm in with this much of my time, or these relationships here, or this amount of money? Where is it? Will you let God lead you into knowing him with your money, more with your time, with your family, with your home, will you let him invite you deeper into that you could know him more, that others would know him more? He loves you. He loves you. He loves me. Let's join in. Let's jump in. Let me close in prayer. God, thank you for the reality of who you are. Thanks that you love us and you don't want that to be any secret to us. Thanks that you've set the times and places so that we're here right now, considering your word, considering Jesus. It's amazing. For anybody out there listening that has not begun this relationship or journey with you, God, I pray for them, and I pray that you would make especially real to them how active and close and how much you want for them. Lord, I pray that you would help us all consider where are we settling for tiny little imitations or dreams that we got from other insecure humans that just aren't going to do it, aren't going to matter. Lord, would you help us trust you and jump more fully into the real, more authentic, lasting thing that we were actually looking for the whole time. We love you. Thanks for loving us first and way more. It's in your name we pray. Amen.